Hey there, it's Anonymous Tea, where we spill the tea anonymously. Hello, everyone. Hello, YouTubers. Hope you guys are all having an amazing day today, sending good vibes, sending positivity, sending blessings, and good energy to each and every single one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. So today we are talking Beyoncé's dad, Matthew Knowles, has entered the chat in the discussion as to some possible reasons as to why Beyoncé has not won Album of the Year. And real quickly before we get into this video and my reaction to what Matthew Knowles had to say, you guys had a strong reaction to my last video on what my opinion was on why Beyonce has not won Album of the Year, and it's fine. You know, we're here. We're not monolithic, you guys. I don't expect you guys to agree with everything I say or agree with my opinions. That's why we're all here. That's why we're all different. We're all unique. We all have different approaches. We all have different arguments for why we feel certain ways about certain things. It's completely healthy. There's no need to get bent out of shape. There's no need to be in your feelings. It's truly okay, you guys. It is okay. And I'm not anti, Beyonce. I'm not a hater. I am just pointing out things how I see it from my perspective. And like I said, this is somebody who has been supportive of Beyonce, who's been to pretty much all of her tours except for like a couple. So this isn't coming from a place of just somebody who's never listened to Beyonce's music, who's never seen her in concert, who has no idea of anything about her career. It's quite the opposite. If we're keeping it a buck. So I just wanted to say that it's totally fine, right? But I have my opinion. And I'm not going to say what the masses are going to say. That's just not who I am. I've never been that way. I've never had that thought process that I am just going to go with groupthink and just say what everybody else is saying for clicks and views, for clout. No. I'm going to give it to you straight. I'm going to give it to you raw in my opinion. And you can take it or leave it. It's fine. So let's get into what Matthew Knowles has said. So TMZ has, gotten a hold of Matthew Knowles, or Matthew Knowles has gotten a hold of TMZ. I don't know. Whenever Beyonce is in the news for anything, they somehow find her father, or her father finds the news. And just really quick, Matthew was Beyonce's manager until 2014, until she fired him. So just some context, as well as, of course, the development of Destiny's Child and everything else, right? So the following, as we know, Jay-Z was basically saying when he accepted his Global Icon Award at the Grammys the other night, said that the Recording Academy was at fault for Beyonce never winning the top prize at the Grammys, but Beyonce's father says that her own record label is also contributing to the snub. So on Monday, they asked Matthew, Beyonce's father, about Jay-Z's quote-unquote spicy speech at the Grammys and what was holding Beyonce back from winning Album of the Year. While Hov pointed the finger at the voters, Matthew claims Beyonce's record label, Columbia Records, isn't doing its part behind the scenes, suggesting that it is not going to bat for her when it comes to the voting process or the lobbying involved for award shows. As Matthew explains, the record labels can only support one artist per category, which becomes an issue when artists from the same label are nominated for the same award, as has been the case with Beyonce at least twice. Matthew says this exact scenario played back out in 2017 when Beyonce and Adele, who also was assigned to Columbia, were both nominated for Album of the Year. Beyonce's dad claims Columbia Records threw its support behind Adele, and she ended up trumping Beyonce for the Grammy. Harry Styles is also on Columbia, by the way, and last year he beat out Beyonce for Album of the Year. Matthew says that there are all sorts of reasons a label would support one artist over another. He broke down a few for us while also pointing out it is not always about the music itself. Jay-Z admitted in his speech this whole process is subjective, and Matthew's not denying that, but he also says money is a big motivator here too. Beyonce may very well win Album of the Year somewhere down the line, but at the moment her father seems to be implying that the powers that be just aren't in her corner for the top prize. Of course, Jay's solution was to, quote, keep showing up to the point where she can no longer be denied, but Matthew saying Beyonce's label has to show up for her. It's an interesting conversation, and Matthew takes us behind the curtain on the nomination and voting process. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. First and foremost, regardless of what you think of Matthew Knowles and his personal life, or some of the things that went wrong when he was managing Beyonce, and some of the rumors and things as to why she ultimately fired him, the one thing that I will not deny as far as Matthew Knowles is Beyonce was everywhere when he was her manager. Beyonce was everywhere. Beyonce was doing tons of promo. Beyonce was, on all the night shows. She was on all the daytime shows. She was performing. She was working, promoting these albums, and, really, her past, few albums, she's not been promoting. She's not been doing interviews, and the interviews she does do, you can basically email her the questions. But she has not sat down face to face with anybody in quite some time. The only time you're going to hear her talk is at her concerts or when she's accepting an award. like real talk. And that's Beyonce's prerogative, right? If she doesn't want to do interviews or whatever. But similar to the Oscars, there's an element of campaigning that exists that you can't deny. There's several factors that are involved, right? But basically, in the case, at least in two of the instances where both Adele and Harry Styles won Album of the Year over Beyonce, they basically voted for the more quote-unquote commercial successful album. And ultimately, both of those albums outsold Beyonce's. Right? So it's not necessarily always about, like, I'm seeing all kinds of things. Oh, it's about the number of songwriters. Oh, it's, they're being discriminatory and blah, 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 blah. Well, here's the thing, you guys. In 66 years of the Grammys, only 11 black artists, have won Album of the Year. So I didn't like that Jay-Z just tried to make this a Beyonce-related issue, because it's not a Beyonce-related issue. It's an issue overall. Literally, SZA was also nominated for Album of the Year and didn't win. So it's bigger than just Beyonce. And like I said in a previous video, a lot of your major artists, Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, Prince, have not won Album of the Year. Have not. And don't even have half the Grammys that Beyonce and Jay-Z have. So, and I think people forget how much campaigning Matthew did on Beyonce's behalf for the Grammys, because he was on the committee, and and also opened up the door for a lot more awards for black artists. But the problem with that is, if Beyonce was nominated in those same R&B categories that, for whatever reason, her and Jay-Z don't want to take seriously, to me, a Grammy is a Grammy. But they put on the pedestal the record of the year, the song of the year, the album of the year, and everything else, and Best New Artist is like the quote-unquote pinnacle. When to me, a Grammy's a Grammy. But ultimately, if there's other black artists who are nominated with Beyonce in these other categories, and these R&B categories, 9 times out of 10, Beyonce's going to win. And it's going to sweep a lot of those artists. But you're asking for some type of other type of treatment or some type of whatever. And the other side of this is Beyonce has never promoted herself as an artist. She's promoted herself as a touring machine, as somebody who is going to put her all into touring, because touring ultimately financially benefits the artist more. Right? But there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you guys don't know. And there's been a multitude of reasons why some of these anonymous voters, who are also technically Beyonce's peers, do not want to vote for her to win. And it's a multitude of reasons. There's some people who said that, Beyonce and Adele have won too many awards. There's some people who are upset with Beyonce and how she approaches the songwriting process, because regardless if she
co-wrote a song or not, she's still going to get, you know, some of the first credits of, you know, that particular song. So some songwriters and, you know, things feel a certain type of way about that. They're not obviously going to publicly out themselves about that, because you see what happened when Neo did that, right? In regards to how he said that he wrote Irreplaceable and had the reference track on YouTube and everything else, and Beyonce was going around saying that she wrote Irreplaceable, and he was trying to explain the songwriting process as far as people can change the melodies or different things, but ultimately he wrote the song, and originally it was supposed to be from a different perspective. You see what I mean? But there's a lot of moving parts, you guys. But I don't feel Jay-Z's comments help Beyonce. I felt it came off kind of entitled and self-righteous, especially when you're accepting an award at the same venue, at the same place that you're criticizing. Like I said, this could hurt. Here's the problem with what Jay-Z did that you guys aren't going to see until when it happens, or if it happens. Two things are going to happen from here. Is either Beyonce is going to put out an album, and regardless if you like it or dislike it as much as the other albums that were nominated for Album of the Year, and it potentially is going to win just for the simple fact that, oh, Jay-Z got on stage and was like, oh, Beyonce needs to win this Album of the Year. Or what's going to happen is the Grammys are going to continue to snub Beyonce and might not even consider her for a nomination of Album of the Year altogether, because they don't want to deal with the riffraff. And see, here's the thing, like I said in my previous video, if Jay-Z and Beyonce want to take an actual stand against the Grammys and feel like they are truly being disrespected from the Grammys, do what Drake and The Weeknd are doing, which is boycotting the Grammys altogether, not even showing up, or do what Bruno Mars did, a year or so ago, where he withdrew his submissions for Silk Sonic. So the year before, when the Silk Sonic album came out, it was past the deadline for the Grammys, so the only thing that was eligible to win was the single Leave the Door Open, which swept the Grammys in those categories. But ultimately, Bruno Mars withdrew his, other songs and album for consideration when he was eligible and was the favorite to win that year. And basically said that he was thankful for, the awards and the recognition, but wanted to give the opportunity to other people. I've never, heard of too many artists doing stuff like that. More power to Bruno Mars for doing that, but there's too much ego in these celebrities for them to ever do that. But my point is, there's an element of campaigning that Beyonce is not going to do. And that's her right. She feels like she's established herself in this industry. She feels like, she's already, done her work. But for those of you who are saying that she is unbothered, based off of the fact of how hard Tina Knowles, Matthew Knowles, and Jay-Z goes hard in the paint to basically express Beyonce's views without Beyonce telling us herself, is basically them being her mouthpiece. So she is bothered. She does feel a certain type of way that Album of the Year is still not among her awards, although she is the most awarded Grammy artist ever with 32 Grammys, tied with Jay-Z, her husband, with the most Grammy nominations ever at 88 nominations. And the thing is, you guys, Beyonce wasn't even nominated for a Grammy at this past year's Grammys. So the other piece of this is it took away from the current nominees. And we had a lot of Black excellence to be celebrating, with Victoria Monet winning Grammys for the first time, with Tyler winning Grammy, and with also Killer Mike winning a few Grammys, and also SZA winning a few Grammys. So there was a lot, and then in some of the other categories, like Dave Chappelle won, and the Obamas won. So, but again, I just don't understand the Keith Sweat begging for these white award shows to quote unquote have these seats at the table, and even if you do have these seats at the table, you still have zero power. This is the same Jay-Z who boycotted the Grammys. I know he was saying because quote-unquote DMX, but actually the reality was they were not televising the rap awards, and Jay-Z won that year. But anyways, in addition, like I said, as far as taking a stand and just not showing up to the Grammys at all and just not submitting your work at all, to just not even deal like with all of the foolery that's taking place, I can't deal with the hypocrisy though. This is the same Jay-Z who boycotted the NFL on behalf of the Colin Kaepernick, him kneeling and everything else, and fighting and advocating for civil rights and justice and everything else. And, ultimately, Jermaine Dupri originally was offered the position that Jay-Z now has with the NFL. And Jay-Z told Jermaine Dupri not to take it. But see, this is the issue that I have, is Jay-Z will do these things. He will pretend to be with the people and to pretend to be outraged until we find out around the corner behind the scenes that there's some position that he is going to also benefit from, the same position that he previously was telling us we needed to boycott and not support. This is the same person who went 0 for 8 in the Grammys, for his submissions, and even called out the Grammys in the song 8 Bleep, and saying F the Grammys in the 0 for 8 bleep, but then you're continuing to show up and accept awards at the Grammys, when it's convenient for you. You can't have it both ways. I think that's the part you guys are missing, is that it comes off very entitled and self-righteous that you were the most awarded and nominated person ever in the history of the Grammys, more than Michael Jackson, more than Janet Jackson, more than Whitney Houston, more than Mariah Carey, more than all these quote-unquote powerhouses. And we still have a group of artists, a whole bunch of artists who still don't even have a Grammy. They gave Diana Ross a Lifetime Achievement Award type of Grammy, but she doesn't have an official Grammy recognizing actually her work. Like winning for an actual song or winning for an actual album. She doesn't have that. New Edition doesn't have a Grammy. SWV doesn't have a Grammy. There are tons of black artists who have been very successful who still do not have a Grammy. And I have not heard the same type of energy that is being towards, them that I'm hearing for Beyonce. And if we want to keep it a buck, some of the music isn't what you guys think it is. And that's why I showed receipts in my video the other day, because you guys aren't streaming Beyonce like that. And if you are streaming Beyonce like that, you're streaming her old music. I think, unfortunately, some of you guys fell for the PR machine and fell for the trap into thinking some of these albums were better than what they actually are. Like I said, I still think Beyonce's best work is the stuff she did with Destiny's Child and her first 2 solo albums. And I like the 4 album, most of the songs on the 4 album. But as far as her other solo albums, some of them, there's some cool singles on there, but they're not albums I want to listen to all the way through. And even the first 2 solo albums, yes, for me, the first solo album, Dangerously in Love, is 0 skips. But do I feel like that's on the level of the Diamond Confessions album or the Diamond Emancipation of Mimi album, or on the level of a Rhythm Nation or Control album, or on the level of a Thriller, Bad, or Dangerous album? No. But I think, I think some of what people have done, and this is, again, why I don't always like stan culture, is sometimes we overhype things. And we don't take off our stan glasses and evaluate and say, is this song really as good as we think it is? Is this album really as good as we think it is? Or are we overhyping it because of who it is? Are we overdoing it because of the success of said artist? And that happens sometimes, right? That happens where we get to a point with some of our faves where we don't want to acknowledge, this wasn't good. Like, I'm a diehard Usher fan, for instance, but I didn't like his era when he was doing the dance music, the OMG and all those things, right? I didn't like any of that. Where he was following the trend of everybody doing like the techno stuff. It worked out for him in terms of the songs being successful and selling a lot, but he was not selling a lot in the contrast in his albums because a lot of people weren't feeling that music. But I think in regards to Beyonce is some of the quote-unquote risks that she's taking is not translating to the viewers, to the voters. And that's why she keeps getting snubbed. It's a multitude of reasons. There are some people who are voting who are just not going to vote for Beyonce, who are sick of Beyonce winning all these awards. Unfortunately, those people are on the committee still. But there are other people who, kind of what Matthew Knowles is saying, that if you are on the same record label and there's another artist who has a more commercially successful album than you, such as Adele and Harry Styles, they're going to win over you. And it's not personal. It has nothing to do with race or anything like that. This is strictly based off of the fact that basically Beyonce's record label, Columbia Records, is saying, hey, we find Adele and Harry Styles more marketable than you. We find Adele and Harry Styles more commercially successful than you. And, and they're going to put their backing behind them because they're selling, not just their tours, their music is selling, their music is breaking records. Regardless if you like their music or not, it's not about that. It's a multitude of factors here, you guys. And I think that's what's being lost in this. Some of it, in my opinion, still has to do ultimately with the music itself. To where I personally feel the albums that were nominated for Album of the Year, I didn't feel the way that Beyonce lost them, because I have my own reasons for why I feel each of those albums were not Album of the Year worthy compared to her first two solo albums that I felt in comparison were a lot better and more quote-unquote worthy of that. And Sasha Fierce being the closest one to, technically winning that, because that would be the definition of quote-unquote the commercial success that, some of these Grammy voters are looking for. But nonetheless, if I'm the Grammys, if I'm the Recording Academy, I'm also saying as well, do you know how many artists we have snubbed that potentially sold more records than you, that potentially had better songs than you, better albums than you did, that basically we, voted for you to win no matter what because you're Beyonce. So there's another factor to that as well. If I'm the Grammys and the Recording Academy, I'm saying you're the most awarded Grammy artist of all time. You're the most nominated Grammy artist of all time. And you still show up to the Grammys anytime you know that you're guaranteed an award. So if you are so upset about Album of the Year, why do you keep coming to these awards? Why do you keep accepting awards if you don't care about these awards if it's not Album of the Year? And now, like I said earlier, if Beyonce ever wins Album of the Year, people are either going to see it as a quote-unquote pity award because of, what Jay-Z has said, what Beyonce's mom has said, what, Beyonce's father has now said. And people are going to vote, basically out of pressure, of feeling like they're pressured to vote for Album of the Year, even if they feel like this was not the best song in that category, or the best album in that category. Or what's going to happen is Beyonce will continue to be snubbed, because people won't want to deal with it. And people might feel a certain type of way because it's like, hey, we're still nominating other black artists for Album of the Year, and we're still awarding Grammys to other black artists, and and you're taking away from this. You're making it seem like we're discriminating against you specifically. But it's a larger problem where a lot of black artists are not winning Album of the Year. It's not a Beyonce issue. is what I think people need to understand. And I think, unfortunately, some of you fell for the trap in thinking some of these albums were more successful than what they were. It was even exposed that even the Lemonade album, that the numbers were cooked. And it's not me lying. Tidal was exposed for that. Because they said that it was unrealistic that people could have been streaming it that much within a 24-hour, 7-day period to match what those numbers were saying. Because they were saying literally if you listen to the album all the way through, X amount of days, or even through a 24-hour period, there's only so many streams per person can do based off of the number of subscribers that they had. So some of you, unfortunately, and it's your prerogative and your preference of what Beyonce's albums you prefer than others and what songs you prefer than others. But what I'm saying is, unfortunately, some things were overhyped. Some things were, excellent PR, but we're not translating in the music. And the one thing I will say, as far as Matthew Knowles, regardless if you like him or not, is I feel the music was better when he was managing Beyonce. I truly do. I'm not, saying that to be biased or a hater, because, even some of the stuff on I Am Sasha Fierce I didn't like. Some of the songs on B-Day I didn't like, but overall, they're better albums. If we're keeping it a buck. But like I said in the previous video, I feel like Beyonce put out a lot of, Grammy Album of the Year bait type of albums versus her being true to herself on who she is as an artist, and keeps, setting herself up for failure. Matthew Knowles, say what you want about him. He had the influence on what songs were appropriate, what should have been the singles and marketing and everything else for Beyonce's earlier work. And although Jay-Z is not officially Beyonce's manager, Roc Nation briefly was after she fired her father, but Jay-Z has a lot of influence. And he has a lot of influence on what Beyonce's done as far as a lot of their joint tours, their joint album that they did. Jay-Z ignoring his own artist on Roc Nation to prop up Beyonce. Jay-Z's own artist being nominated in the same categories as Beyonce and not winning. So there's been influence to where there have been artists on Roc Nation who have had better selling albums, better selling singles than Beyonce that should have won. If we're basing it off of sales and commercial success and all of these other factors that these voters are claiming are what they're looking for, that still lost to Beyonce when it was all said and done. And I don't hear any of those artists complaining, because a lot of these artists are not putting these awards on a pedestal. Mariah Carey is the best-selling female vocalist of all time and only has, 5 or 6 Grammys? That's unacceptable. And she's not complaining. Heck, she wouldn't even show up to the Grammys after a certain point. And Michael Jackson boycotted the Grammys after he had lost one of his Album of the Years he should have won, because he saw the game. But we can't say things are rigged or things are messed up. But at the same token, you've also benefited by being the most awarded of all time. It can't be both ways. It can't be both. And that's my whole point, right? So there is that. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments. What do you think of Matthew Knowles and his comments as to why he believes, Beyonce is not won Album of the Year? Me personally, it's because he's no longer her manager. But nonetheless, he is also blaming Columbia Records and saying, hey, that the label is deciding that they don't feel that, Beyonce, they need to market or promote Beyonce compared to their other artists who are outselling her, is basically what it's coming down to. So there's that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you're notified the moment I post new content on my channel. And with that being said, I'll talk to you guys again very soon.